Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we trace old trails through bone-dry hollows, answer whistles in the dark, and wake in cabins that were never empty. 8 stories from the Appalachian deep where shadows fall out of step. Red cloth marks the cursed path, and something ancient waits beneath the turning leaves. If this sounds familiar, stay with us. Now, hush. The mountains have already heard you. If the leaves fall upward, don't stay past dusk. The ranger warned me at the trailhead. He looked half joking when he said it, but his eyes lingered too long. He was young, maybe my age, but already wore that worn look locals get, like they knew something the rest of us didn't. I laughed and said I'd be fine. Camera bag slung over my shoulder, boots already stained red from the clay. I didn't bother asking what he meant. Not then. I hadn't been back to the Roan Highlands since I was 16. The last time, I was with my brother, Eli. He'd wandered off the trail while I was changing film, chasing what he swore was a white deer. We found him 2 hours later, standing dead still in a ring of pine cones, blood on his cheek and no memory of how he got there. My parents blamed dehydration. I blamed myself. Now I was 31, with a photography grant in hand and something to prove. I told myself it was just for the light autumn soft blaze across the ridgeline, the golden hour dipping into rust. But I packed Eli's compass in my coat pocket and didn't tell anyone I was going back to the same stretch of trail. I told myself I wanted closure. The truth is, I wanted to see if the mountain would give anything back. The first day was calm, too calm. The trees held their breath as I passed, not even a bird call. By late afternoon, I'd made it to a flat clearing with a good view of Hump Mountain. I set up camp, brewed tea, and waited for the sun to hit that slanted angle that turns the leaves molten. My camera clicked, caught light. It felt good, normal, like maybe I'd outgrown the fear. That night, the dreams returned. Eli standing by the tree line, mouth moving but no sound. A cassette player in his hands, covered in duct tape, playing something in reverse low. Garbled voices like prayers in water. When I woke, my fingers hurt. I'd been clenching them so tight my nails had cut the skin. I stepped out of the tent, bleary-eyed, and saw the pine cones. They circled my whole tent. Neat, deliberate, like something drawn from memory. I hadn't heard a thing all night. No wind, no animals, just silence. And that cassette voice echoing in my ears. I kicked the pine cones aside and told myself it was a prank. I was alone out here, but maybe another hiker had come by while I slept. That seemed easier to believe than the alternative. The second day I climbed a bit higher, trying to forget it. The shots were coming out nice mist off the grass, low clouds catching fire in the sun. I told myself I'd sleep better that night. But around sunset, the wind shifted, leaves lifted off the ground, fluttering in strange spirals, not falling, but rising. I looked up and saw them drifting past the trees, climbing into the sky like ash. I thought of the ranger's words. If the leaves fall upward, I didn't finish the sentence. I packed faster than I ever had, stuffed gear and tripod into my pack, heart punching through my ribs. I'd only made it 20 yards when I heard the first whisper. Low, stretched, and echoing from my right the exact sound from the dream. I froze. Then it came again. From the left. The same voice, repeating something unintelligible, like tape dragged through mud. I ran. No shame, no hesitation. My boots pounded the trail, breath burning, branches slapping against my jacket. The sun was almost gone. I didn't stop until I hit the rocky overlook where the trail split. My legs gave out. I dropped to the dirt and sat there, heaving, staring back toward the trees. That's when I heard the click. Not from the forest, from my bag. I reached in, unzipped the side pouch, and pulled out the camera. The lens was shattered, the shutter clicking by itself, over and over, snap, 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 like it was trying to take something that wasn't there, or something that was. I dropped it, let it fall to the ground, still twitching, and then I heard it again. A whisper. No, not a whisper. A name. Mason. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back against the overlooked stone outcrop, flashlight on my lap, and Eli's compass clenched in my hand. The wind blew steady from the east, rustling the leaves in long, sighing waves. I kept staring at the trail, half expecting someone or something to walk up from the trees. But nothing did. The compass needle jittered all night, spinning, twitching, then stopping to point due west, where the pine cones had been. By morning, the camera was still. The shutter had stopped clicking sometime before dawn, the lens cracked but the body intact. I shoved it back in my pack, too tired to think straight, and started down the slope. Every part of me wanted to leave, but halfway down the trail, I stopped. My hands shook. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't go. Not yet. I told myself I needed one more photo, something to show the grant committee, something to justify the trip. But underneath that, deeper, something old and unfinished pulled at me. I remembered Eli's blank stare in that pine cone ring, the blood on his cheek, the days after when he started waking up with nosebleeds and muttering in his sleep. I remembered how the dream spread to me. Too, I had left, but I hadn't escaped. And now I was back. So I turned west. The unmarked trail was barely a path, just a thinning between the trees. Soft moss underfoot and branches low enough to rake your scalp. Every few yards, I found little signs, red string tied around bark, faded bones hanging from fishing line, a child's mitten nailed to a stump. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects. Even the wind died. And then I saw it. The tree. It stood alone, in a hollow of stone. Roots pushing up through shale like fingers breaking through skin. Bark gray and slick. No leaves, just thin red cloth tied to its branches, fluttering in slow, unnatural movements. At its base, a ring of pine cones. Perfect, geometric, familiar. I didn't want to step into the ring, but I did. There was no sound inside it, no rustling, no heartbeat, just pressure, like being underwater. I lifted the camera, aimed at the tree, and took one photo. The shutter clicked. A breath of cold hit my neck. I turned to no one there. But the cloth above me spun violently in the airless silence, twisting like it was wringing something out of the sky. That's when I saw the cassette player, half buried in the roots. Same tape, same duct tape markings. I reached for it, then stopped. The dirt around it pulsed slightly, like breath. I backed away, heart thudding. When I heard the whisper again, Mason, but this time, I understood the second word. Stay! I ran. This time, I didn't stop. Branches slapped my face. Roots caught at my boots. The trees seemed to lean inward. I burst out of the woods by late afternoon, unsure how much time had passed. My camp was still there, but the tent was torn, my gear scattered. The camera lay in the grass. Its lens pointed up. I picked it up and checked the screen. Just one photo had saved the turning tree. Red cloth spinning. Sky above it pitch black like the sun had been swallowed. But in the frame barely visible behind the tree stood Eli. His eyes were open, and he was holding the cassette player. I don't remember hiking out. I must have made it to the trailhead sometime before midnight, because I woke up on the floor of the ranger station, camera beside me, compass still in my hand. The ranger who found me wouldn't meet my eyes. He just handed me a cup of coffee and whispered, "You saw it." I nodded. He looked out the window. "Did you hear your name?" I said nothing. He gave me a long look. "Then it's not done with you." The leaves outside were falling in lazy spirals. I'm Daniel Travis. My grandmother was born and buried in Clay County, Kentucky. She lived in a house at the end of a gravel road, hemmed in by oak and poison ivy and thyme. As a kid, I hated visiting. The air always smelled like vinegar and something else, mildewed blankets, maybe. But she'd press her hands on both sides of my face, look me dead in the eye, and say, "Don't look at the windows after dark, Daniel. Promise me." I never understood it, but I promised. She died last spring, and I didn't go to the funeral. Too much guilt. Too many memories I'd tried to forget. But a week ago, I got a letter from her lawyer, a small inheritance, and the deed to her land. I drove out with the idea of cleaning it up, maybe selling it. But the truth is, I came to camp on the property, not to honor her. Not really. I want to know what scared her so badly. The house is nothing now. Roof caved in, vines swallowing the front porch, chimney cracked open like a broken spine. I don't even bother going inside. I set up camp in the field out back where I used to catch fireflies. The woods press in close, thicker than I remember, and the wind makes the tall grass whisper like it's trying to speak through my old name. That night, I wake up at 2:11 a.m. to a sound. It's faint tap, tap, tap. I sit up and unzip the tent, but I don't step out. The sound isn't outside. It's behind me, at the window of the house. I tell myself it's the wind, maybe a branch tapping the broken glass. But the second night, it happens again. Tap, 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 same time. And this time, I'm already staring at the house. I see the window. There's a shadow standing behind it. Small, still, like a child. I stay in the tent until dawn. On the third night, I bring my flashlight and my resolve. I wait, heart pounding. 2:11 a.m. Comes. Nothing. Then tap, Tap, tap. It's louder now, like knuckles. I flick on the light, shine it straight at the window, and see the handprint. Pale, small, pressed to the inside of the glass. I can't breathe. The next morning, I finally go into the house. It smells like mold and something else sweet and wrong. Dust curls off everything like skin. I find the old bookshelf where she kept her jars of herbs and bird bones. But something's been moved. In the corner of the living room is a rocking chair, facing the window, and on the floor beneath it, scrawled in charcoal, is one word over and over again: trade. That's when I remember the stories she used to tell me when I cried at night. About the whisperer, about the knock on the window, how if you answered it, really looked, it would offer you something in return, someone you missed, someone you lost. But if you said yes, it took you instead. My grandma always said the whisperer knocked 3 times for 3 nights, and then it stopped waiting. I sleep in the car that night, but at 2:11 the back window fogs over, and I hear it tap, 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 followed by a small whisper, muffled through glass: Daniel. I don't move. I don't breathe. I sit in the driver's seat, frozen, staring at the fogged glass behind me where the voice came from. Nothing moves. The woods are silent, but I see the shape again this time, clearer, small shoulders, a head tilted just so, fingers pressed lightly to the glass. And then it's gone, the fog clearing as if someone wiped it from the outside in one slow, deliberate arc. At sunrise, I do something stupid. I go back into the house. The charcoal writing is still there, but now it's spread to the floorboards near the door. Trade. Always the same word. Over and over, in smaller and smaller scrawl. In the kitchen, I find the old cookie tin my grandmother used to keep her sewing needles in. Inside are scraps of newspaper, cutouts from obituaries, a brittle ribbon of hair, and a photo. Me and her, taken when I was maybe 7. She's looking at the camera. I'm not. I'm staring at the window. That day I hike up the ridge behind the property, trying to get signal. I think I'll call someone my cousin Sarah. Maybe, but I never get bars. The trees up here are wrong. Too close together. Bark pitted with round holes like something's been sucking the life out of them. Near the top, I find a pile of smooth stones stacked in a spiral too perfect to be random. A doll's shoe sits on top. The kind I remember my sister used to carry around. She's been gone 20 years. I don't remember leaving it there. But it looks familiar. That night, I don't sleep. I sit outside the tent with a lantern burning low, clutching my grandmother's old Bible, though the pages are swollen and illegible from years of damp. At 2:11, I hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it's on the tent. I don't turn. I close my eyes and listen. Then the zipper begins to slide. Slow. Metal on fabric. I scream and spin around with the lantern. Nothing. No one. The zipper is still half drawn, like fingers stopped mid-motion. My light catches the ground outside. Bare footprints, child-sized, leading away from the tent, but not toward the house. They're circling it. I pack at dawn. I throw everything in the car, not even caring what I leave behind. But when I try to drive out, the tires spin, mud, the road's soaked, though it didn't rain. It takes me an hour to wedge the car free. And when I do, I glance back up the trail, the house window. There's something there. Not a person, a reflection. Mine, only I'm not in the car. I drive. I don't stop. I don't look back. I spend the night in a motel outside Manchester. The clerk eyes me when I check in, says I smell like old dirt. I sleep with the lights on, no tapping. But the next morning, I find a child's drawing slid under the door. Crayon, shaky lines, a house, a field, a tent, and in the window, a dark figure with white eyes. Underneath, in block letters, it says I said his name. I throw it away, try to forget, try to sleep normal hours. Weeks pass, but I still wake at 2:11, and sometimes, when the windows fog over, I swear I see a handprint. I was already bleeding when I stumbled out of Devil's Thread Hollow. Not badly, just a slice across my palm where a thorn snagged me. But it stung in a way that felt personal, like the woods had waited to draw blood. I wrapped it with a bandana, kept walking. The ridge above the hollow dropped off into steep ravines. But I didn't care about the terrain. I wasn't out here for a scenic hike or peace of mind. I'd come to be alone, far from cell towers and old habits, far from anyone who might ask how I was doing. That's the story I told my parole officer. Anyway, what I didn't say was that I needed this, to feel something like control again. A month clean isn't a victory. It's a whisper. You have to protect it like a flame in the wind. I chose the Greenbrier section of the Smokies because it was isolated and unmonitored. There were caves out here, old stone foundations, places that didn't exist on most trail maps, places where things could go missing, things like memory, things like people. My name's Rachel Greer. I used to be someone. Good job. Apartment in Asheville. A laugh that didn't sound brittle. Then came the spiral first, my sister's overdose. Then the night I got pulled over with a glove box full of pills I couldn't even name. I've been clean for 34 days. I don't trust it. I don't trust myself. So I came out here with a tent, a pot, a lighter, and nothing else. I found the clearing by accident, tucked behind a rotting log bridge where the map said nothing should be. A ring of old stones in the center, moss-covered but neatly placed, like a forgotten hearth. I set up camp nearby. Something about the place felt still not silent, not ominous, just paused, like it was waiting to resume after I left. That first night, I slept harder than I had in weeks. No cravings, no dreams. I woke up warm, head resting against my rolled-up coat, the smell of smoke faint in the air. But I hadn't made a fire. I sat up fast. The ring of stones now held charred wood, smoldering at the edges like it had just burned. And beside the fire pit, laid neatly on a flat stone, was a small bundle of berries, black, glossy, and still wet with dew. I didn't eat them, but I didn't throw them away either. I convinced myself I'd somehow done it in a sleepwalking daze, some buried need to create order, to feed myself. That afternoon, I walked the ridge above the hollow and tried to distract my mind by identifying bird calls. but every path seemed to loop back to the same clearing. No matter which way I turned, by dusk, I gave up and returned to the ring of stones. The berries were gone. That night, I lit my own fire. I sat staring into it until the flames died to coals, until the sky cracked open with stars. The stillness pressed in again, not heavy, more like attention, like the woods had eyes. Before crawling into the tent, I looked once more at the stone where the berries had been. A single, thin bone now lay across it, carved with a spiral on both ends. I knew the symbol. My sister had it tattooed on her ankle. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid in the tent with my eyes wide, breath shallow, the little bone charm beside me on the ground where I'd dropped it. I kept telling myself it wasn't her. That spiral symbol didn't belong to my sister. It belonged to 100 folk carvings and old mountain tattoos, passed around like recipes. But I couldn't stop seeing her leg in the hospital bed, that faint spiral just above the IV line, the way her foot jerked right before the machines went flat. By morning, the bone was gone. I checked my pack, my pockets, even under the tent in case it rolled. Nothing. I told myself I must have kicked it away in the dark. But a feeling settled over me, low, steady, impossible to shake, like I'd been chosen for something I didn't ask for, or worse, like I'd been mistaken for someone else. I tried to leave. I packed everything, slung the bag over my shoulder, and started downhill toward where I thought the car was. But the trail had changed. Paths I remembered were gone, and new ones twisted in their place. I tried to use the sun to navigate, but it seemed to shift every time I checked. The woods had grown denser, too, closer somehow. No birds, no bugs, just the sound of my boots on damp leaves. And, now and then, a breath of wind that carried the scent of burning. By mid-afternoon, I found the clearing again. The fire ring had been rebuilt, stacked higher with stone. Inside it, new embers glowed, still warm. I dropped my bag and looked around, heart hammering. "Who's out here?" I shouted. Nothing. Just the wind curling through branches. But when I turned back, something sat atop my pack. A spoon, wooden, carved from bone-colored pine, stained dark on the handle. My name was etched into the underside in shaky letters. My full name, Rachel Lynn Greer. My knees buckled, and I had to sit. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I hadn't spoken my full name out loud in weeks. That night, I didn't light a fire. I curled into the tent and pressed my back to the wall, watching the zippered flap. Sometime after midnight, I heard it again. Not footsteps, something softer, like dragging, like someone pulling a stick through ash. And then a low voice, almost a whisper, but too clear. "You're doing better now." I froze. Tears welled up without warning. It sounded like her. It sounded exactly like her. "You can stay." I stayed up until dawn, shaking. The next morning, the berries were back. This time inside my boot. I didn't touch them. I stuffed them into the fire pit, which hadn't gone out in days, and watched them shrivel and smoke. The spoon was gone again. I looked around the clearing, no movement, no footprints, no sign of life. But something had changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt wanted. I stayed another night, then another. I stopped counting the days. The cravings vanished. The guilt ebbed like a bruise healing from the center out. I woke up one morning and realized I hadn't thought about using in over a week. The bone charm reappeared, strung from a branch above my tent. It swayed in the wind like it was watching me, or waiting. The final night, I dreamed I was standing in the fire ring, the stones glowing red beneath my feet. My sister stood outside the circle, her arms crossed like she used to do when she was trying not to smile. She said, "You're not broken, not here." And when I woke, the fire was burning on its own. I left the next morning, found my car just where I left it, though I didn't remember the way back. Drove straight into town, straight to my parole officer. Took the test, passed clean. He said I looked different, lighter. I just smiled and said I'd found a good place to think. I still carry the spoon. It's in my glove box. Sometimes I dream of the hollow. And when I do, I wake with the scent of smoke on my clothes. There were 4 of us that weekend. Only 3 came back. Nick Malone, Julia Cates, and Ben Harrow. We were junior wildlife biology interns on a summer field survey in the Monongahela National Forest. The 4th was Jacob Kerrigan, our friend and classmate. Quiet, methodical, always the one double-checking the trail map. We hiked out together that Friday afternoon. Jacob didn't hike back. That was 2 years ago. He walked 20 yards off the trail to photograph a fox den, then vanished. No scream, no sound, no sign. We searched for hours, then days, along with rangers and dogs and helicopters. Nothing. Just an unzipped pack in his notebook lying open to a sketch of a tree twisted, split down the center like lightning had cracked it in half. I couldn't shake it. I still can't. So when my contract with the forestry department came up this year, I requested Monongahela. I told them I was revisiting an old site for species tracking, maybe setting up some trail cams. But I returned to the exact spot Jacob disappeared, alone, with a map he once marked up in red pen, and something I'd never told anyone, a photo I took the night before he vanished, where his shadow stretched in the wrong direction. Longer than it should have been. It started subtle this time. A second set of footprints beside mine. Not always clear, but just enough to make me pause. I brushed it off as paranoia mud shifting underfoot, the shape of the trail playing tricks on my eyes. But the second night, I saw them in full. My boot prints trailed off to my left, and another set veered slightly behind and to the right. Identical tread, identical depth, like someone walking with me, just a little slower. I remembered what the old ranger told us, the day Jacob vanished. It was a half-joke, one I hadn't thought about since. "If your shadow lags behind at dusk," he'd said, spitting tobacco into the dirt, "don't wait for it, just keep walking." We'd laughed. Of course we had. But I remembered the way Jacob went still that day, like he'd heard something we hadn't. On the 3rd morning, I found a twig symbol outside my tent, a triangle with a slit through the middle, just like Jacob's sketch of the split tree. It hadn't been there when I zipped the tent shut. I burned it in my cook fire and packed quickly. climbing higher toward an old game trail marked C14 on Jacob's map. The forest felt wrong the deeper I went, too quiet, too heavy. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my breath. And sometimes, leaves shifting behind me, delayed. That night, I set up motion-triggered trail cams and waited. Just before sleep, I checked one of the cameras. The last photo froze my blood. It showed me, sitting by the fire, and behind me, maybe 10 feet back, my own silhouette, black and clear against the trees. But I'd taken the photo in full daylight. I stared at that photo for a long time, the fire popping quietly beside me. My hands had gone numb, not from the cold, but from the deep, root-level fear setting in. It wasn't just a shadow. The shape was wrong, too solid, too defined. My arms were at my sides in the image. The figure behind me had its arms slightly raised, like it was about to reach forward, like it already was. I didn't sleep. I left the fire burning all night, eyes flicking toward the trees, waiting to see movement. Nothing came close, but I could feel something circling. Not footsteps, just weight, presence. I kept the trail cam beside me, watching the little indicator light blink with every motion capture. Just before dawn, I heard a voice. It wasn't clear, just a mumble, my name, maybe. I bolted out of camp at first light, following Jacob's marked trail deeper into the woods. His notes had circled a bend by a narrow creek with the words Shadow Fork written in faded ink. I found it by noon, a split in the trail with a strange tree at the center, its trunk warped and blackened, like it had been burned from the inside out. The ground around it was damp despite the dry weather. No sound but the drip of water from somewhere unseen. I approached the tree. The moment I stepped inside the fork, everything went still. I mean, dead still. Even my breath felt like it didn't belong. I looked down. Only one set of footprints led to the tree mine. But behind me, just behind, the ground shimmered like heat haze. And then I saw it, my shadow lagging behind. Slow, syrupy, arms outstretched. I didn't run. I couldn't. My legs locked. I just stood there, watching as it caught up to me. And past me. It kept moving. Ahead, deeper into the woods. A perfect copy of me, but slightly older. Clothes looser, shoulders slumped. It never looked back. Just walked until it vanished between two trees, like the forest had opened to let it in. I left the fork shaking, stomach hollow. I checked my watch. It had stopped at 4:17 p.m., the exact time Jacob vanished 2 years ago. When I made it back to my campsite, everything was where I left it. But the fire was lit again. My trail cam had been repositioned, and the final photo showed two of me. One sitting by the fire, one watching from the tree line. I broke camp that night, forced myself to hike out. Even as the sun began to dip, I kept moving, didn't stop for anything. But as I passed one final ridge, I looked down and saw my shadow cast long across the dirt. And it hesitated. Just half a second. I kept walking. Now I'm back. I filed my report. I told them nothing. But the trail cam still sits on my desk, I haven't touched it since. Sometimes I wake up at 4:17. The room is quiet, still, and I can't find my shadow. If you see red cloth in the trees, turn around. The gas station clerk told me. He didn't say it like a joke, just handed me a bottle of water and pointed out the old logging road that cuts into the Unicoi Gap Trail. Said not to go too far past the ridgeline. Said the trail forgets you. His hand hovered over the counter when I turned to leave, like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. I go anyway. I'm here because of a story my grandmother used to tell, one that haunted her even after the dementia set in. About the stone dreamers, about a rock buried deep in the mountains that shows you your most wanted dream and takes everything else. My grandmother claimed to have seen it, said it showed her her sister. Years after she drowned, said it followed her dreams afterward. She was never the same. I'm not a believer. I'm a hiker, and I've spent the last 6 years climbing every range the South has to offer. This isn't about ghosts. It's about bloodline. My grandmother passed last fall, and with her, most of our family's Appalachian roots. But the story stuck. So I planned a trip 4 days solo, off the spine of Unicoi, to prove the legend was just that. A story told to scare children away from sinkholes. The first day goes as expected. The trail is steep but manageable. Fog hangs low in the hollows, cool and wet on the skin. My GPS flickers out halfway through the hike. But I've got the map memorized, just before dusk. I find the plateau she described, a saddle-shaped clearing surrounded by poplar and birch. The perfect place to camp. I set up the tent, eat, sleep. That night, I dream in color, bright, almost too vivid. My grandmother is sitting at the old kitchen table, shelling peas. She looks up and says, "You brought it with you." I ask what. She doesn't answer, just points out the window behind her. I wake up drenched in sweat. The second day is when I start seeing them. Red cloth tied in tight knots, hanging from branches at random intervals. Not old and tattered like trail markers, these are recent. Still damp from morning dew. The knots are intricate, deliberate. Too many to be a coincidence. I try to follow a few deeper into the woods, but every time I veer off trail, I feel disoriented, dizzy, like the air itself is thick. By afternoon, I find something that stops me cold. A tree, wide and low, with dozens of those cloth knots tied along the base. Beneath it, arranged in a careful ring, are stones shaped like eyes, and in the center, half buried in mud, something glints. I dig it out. It's a polished black stone, warm to the touch, carved with a shallow spiral on one side. The moment I touch it, my vision flickers just for a heartbeat. And in that blink, I see her again, my grandmother, crying this time, mouthing something I can't hear. The red cloth on the trees flutters hard, though there's no wind. I should have left the stone where I found it. Instead, I pocket it. I tell myself it's for proof, some tactile piece of my grandmother's myth. But deep down, I feel it the moment it touches my skin. Something turns. Not pain, not quite. More like the feeling you get when someone's staring at you from behind and you know not to look. The trees feel closer after that, the light more slanted, the silence more focused. That night, I don't dream. Instead, I wake up standing just outside my tent, bare feet in the wet grass, the stone in my hand. I don't remember getting up. My flashlight is still on inside. Tent unzipped, pack half open. The trees around me sway without wind. I look down and realize my fingernails are packed with dirt, like I've been digging. I follow the trail of disturbed soil a few feet into the woods. There's a small mound, fresh turned earth with something placed neatly atop it, a piece of red cloth knotted around a lock of hair. Blonde, my hair. I step back fast, heart in my throat. When I look up, every tree around me has a strip of red tied to it. Hundreds, maybe more. The dreamless sleep comes again, the next morning. I wake with blood on my lips, like I've been biting them in my sleep. I spit into the dirt and see a small tooth molared, cracked, old, not mine, not human. The stone is still warm in my pocket. I pack quickly, heart pounding. I don't know where I'm going, just away. But the forest doesn't let me go. The map is nonsense now. Trails loop. Routes I thought I passed hours ago curl back underfoot. Every landmark looks almost right, but not quite. Like the mountain is redrawing itself behind my steps. By mid-afternoon, I find another clearing, smaller than the first, more intentional. Stones stacked in a wide spiral, and in the center, a tree hollowed out by age and rot. The stone in my pocket pulses like a heartbeat. I step forward, and everything goes quiet. And then she's there, my grandmother, standing at the edge of the clearing, hands folded. She looks younger than I remember. Her eyes are sharp, mouth drawn. "You brought it with you," she says again. And now I understand she's not welcoming me. She's warning me. I try to speak, but my throat closes. She raises a hand, points at the tree. I turn. Inside the hollow, a face stares back. Mine, but older, weathered, eyes glazed, mouth working slowly, whispering things I can't hear but somehow still understand. Regret, hunger, worship. I fall backward. The cloth around the trees begins to spin, tightening. The stone burns against my leg. "You can leave," she says softly behind me, but something has to stay. I crawl away from the clearing, gasping. When I glance back, she's gone. So is the tree. So is the spiral. I walk for what feels like hours before I find my camp again. Oh, right where I left it. The only difference, the red cloth now braided. Now fresh is wrapped around the handle of my pack. And tucked inside is another stone, identical to the first. Back home, I keep them in a box. I haven't slept in 3 nights. When I do, I feel the stone pressing into my chest. My dreams are blank now. Not empty, just paused. And when the wind blows outside, I swear I see the trees move like they're breathing. I'm Caleb Norris, park ranger, born and raised in Waynesville, North Carolina, just a short drive from the Black Balsam Knob Wilderness. I've worked this forest long enough to know every trail, every offshoot, every ranger station bathroom that actually has working plumbing. My father patrolled here before me. My older brother too, until he got sick and left the job. I thought I'd be the one who stayed, who kept the legacy rooted in these mountains. But the forest doesn't let you stay unchanged. Sheriff's log, September 14th, found the tent. No footprints leading out. I wrote that 2 years ago, when a hiker went missing near Sam Knob. Young guy from UNC Asheville. Solo trip. No emergency beacon. We didn't expect anything strange. People wander off trails more often than most realize. But when I got to his last known location, something didn't sit right. The tent was still staked tight, sleeping bag zipped halfway, pack unopened, no food disturbed, not even a scuffle in the leaves. Just silence and a single, dead straight line of disturbed pine needles leading into the trees. The official cause was hypothermia, but I knew that was a lie. Or maybe just a story we told ourselves because no one wanted to put something darker on paper, something you couldn't write in a report. After that, I couldn't shake the itch. I started pulling old ranger notes, cross-referencing disappearances on the mountain, reading logs that went back decades. I found a pattern. Each case had a strange detail omitted from the public story. 3 whistles, heard after midnight. Always the same timing, always evenly spaced. So I came back. I told dispatch I was doing a solo storm damage survey after last week's rains. Took the long loop trail on purpose, detouring up the ridge to where we found the tent. I didn't bring a partner. I wanted to be alone, not for pride, but for proof. I needed to hear the whistles myself. I needed to know if this was just a coincidence, or if the forest held something it didn't want to explain. The first day felt normal enough. Trail was soft from the rain, but manageable. The sky stayed overcast, and the air hung wet and heavy like a storm still lingered. I made camp before dark, right at the old tent site. Nothing marks it now. But I knew the contours by heart, the slight dip in the soil, the stunted hemlock leaning too far left. I didn't build a fire. I just sat in the quiet, waited for night to settle, and kept my ears open. At 2:13 a.m., it came. 3 sharp whistles, clean and hollow, from somewhere down slope. They didn't echo, and they didn't waver. They sounded like someone calling from far away, but trying not to draw too much attention. I stayed still. The air felt heavy in my lungs. The moment they stopped, I realized I'd been holding my breath. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then I heard them again, closer this time. Still 3, still perfect. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with my back against a cold slab of stone, listening for footsteps I couldn't quite place, keeping the flashlight off like it might draw something closer. The forest didn't return to silence. Instead, it settled into a hum deep and distant, like a throat clearing just under the earth. At dawn, I made coffee with shaking hands and hiked down to the nearby stream to splash water on my face. That's where I saw it. Caught between 2 rocks was a small brass tag, half sunk in mud. When I pried it loose and flipped it over, my blood went cold. It was a ranger badge bent, rusted, with the numbers barely visible. But they weren't just familiar. They were mine. My badge number, etched into the back, the same one pinned to my chest at that exact moment. I looked down. My own badge glinted in the sun, solid and real. But the one in my hand had been aged by time and rain. I dropped it back into the water without thinking and backed away. I tried to keep walking, but the trail kept changing beneath me. Landmarks appeared out of order. A bend that should have led east brought me back to the same clearing I just left. The trees seemed taller, the shadows slower to lift. By midday, the humming returned. Not a noise exactly, but a pressure in the skull like standing beneath a live wire. I stopped to check my compass. It spun lazily, then clicked toward a direction I didn't trust. I returned to camp just before dark. My tent was zipped shut, exactly as I left it. But my boots were facing the wrong way, like I'd walked out of them, like something had been trying them on. I built a fire then, big, hot. It hissed in the damp air like it hated being lit. I sat close, watching the flames until the shadows bent backward and my eyes felt glassy. Then I heard the voice on the radio. Just a whisper. Then a second clearer. 3 whistles, don't answer. It was my voice, not a recording, not a memory. I dropped the radio into the fire. Sparks flew. It didn't stop transmitting. I broke camp by first light and forced my way downhill. Every step felt too loud, like I was walking through a place that had never been stepped in before. My pack got caught in brambles that hadn't been there yesterday. At the trailhead, my truck sat waiting, but the driver's side door was open, and the cab light was blinking slow. On the seat was another ranger badge. Not rusted this time. Clean, dry, and still bearing my name. Now, back at home, I've stopped checking the clock. But I always wake at 2:13, every night. Even if I try to stay awake, I doze off just before. I never remember what I dream. But sometimes, when I rise and pass the mirror, I catch my reflection standing just a second too late. My grandmother told me never to whistle in the woods. I should have listened. I did it halfway through the second day on the trail. No particular reason, just a tune stuck in my head. Something from a TV jingle years ago. It echoed off the trees and faded fast. And for a few seconds, I felt like a kid again, before jobs and bills and the weight of being alone. But the silence that followed was different. The kind that doesn't fall, it lands. Heavy. Like the forest noticed me in a new way. I'm Jesse Ford. I've worked as a seasonal trail guide for 3 summers and still don't believe in half the stories tourists whisper around the fire. I only came to Whiteside Mountain to prep for a ranger exam, not to explore old folklore. The section I hiked had been closed for erosion 2 years ago, but I knew the way and wanted the solitude. What I didn't expect was the pull, that strange instinct that made me step off the familiar trail and follow a path not on any map. Not wide enough to be official. Just there. By the time I reached the clearing, I could feel the shift in the air, a low dip in the land surrounded by dead pines, their bark peeling like skin. I set up camp on the far edge and told myself the slope would shield me from the wind, but the wind never came. The trees stood still. Even the leaves refused to rustle. I found a rusted harmonica near a tree root, half buried in dry soil, and tucked it in my jacket without thinking. I told myself it was trash, but it looked old, cared for. That night, the sound came just as I closed my eyes. A whistle, same tune, same rhythm. Not distant, but close. like someone standing just beyond the firelight, mimicking what I'd whistled earlier. I sat up fast, heart in my throat. Nothing moved outside the tent, but I knew what I heard. I didn't sleep. The second night was worse. I didn't whistle, didn't speak. Sat by the fire with my headlamp scanning the trees, listening. But the mimic came anyway, slightly off this time, like someone trying to hum with their mouth half full of water. Each note was just wrong enough to make my skin crawl, like whoever was out there didn't understand the tune, but wanted me to think they did. That morning, I found a stick figure tied with pine needles laid in front of my tent. No footprints, no marks in the dirt. Just the figure. One leg was shorter than the other, just like mine, from an old hiking injury I never told anyone about. I didn't touch the stick figure. I left it where it was, packed up my gear in silence, and headed for the main trail. My compass worked, but the direction it pointed didn't match where I'd come from. I walked anyway, ignoring the nagging twist in my gut, telling myself I just needed to get back to the marked loop and everything would make sense again. But after 2 hours, I was still surrounded by the same brittle pines, same dead leaves, same silence. I hadn't gone anywhere. I sat down on a fallen log and tried the radio, hoping to reach a ranger station, just static. Then a faint sound behind it, something buried deep in the white noise. It wasn't a voice. It was that same broken whistle, stretched out like it was being dragged through molasses. I shut the radio off and shoved it in my bag. When I looked up, a figure was standing between the trees, half in shadow, just beyond detail. It didn't move. I stood slowly, not daring to call out. The figure stood taller than me, limbs a little too long, head tilted slightly to one side like it was listening. It made a soft sound. Not a word, not even a whistle this time. Just breath repeating the cadence of my tune, trying to replicate rhythm with breath alone. I turned and walked the other way, fast but steady, counting steps to keep from losing my nerve. I didn't run, not until I heard the whistle again. Closer. I sprinted through the underbrush, branches clawing at my face and pack, feet slamming into roots and slick moss. The sound followed now, a jumble of notes, a frantic mimicry like it couldn't keep the pattern right anymore. It came faster, louder, until I broke into a clearing I didn't remember. My legs gave out. I dropped hard and stared back into the trees. Nothing followed, but something watched. That night, I didn't pitch the tent. I found a gap beneath a stone outcrop and hid there. Knees drawn to my chest, harmonica still in my jacket pocket like a weight pressing against my ribs. Around midnight, I heard footsteps circling above. Slow, measured. Once. They paused right over my head. I held my breath until the blood roared in my ears. And then it played the harmonica. Just once. One long, mournful note, like someone trying to remember what sadness feels like. At sunrise, I walked again. I stopped looking at the compass. I just moved, hoping the thing would lose interest. By late afternoon, I saw trail markings fresh, real, cut into stone. Relief hit so hard it made me dizzy. I followed them until I reached a fire road and collapsed there, waiting for the sound of an engine, another person, anything. Back home, I told myself it was stress, isolation, hallucination. But I mailed the harmonica to a ranger friend in Georgia without explanation. He called me last week, said he found a stick figure in his tent, with one short leg. He asked if I'd been whistling lately. I said no, and I haven't. Not since. The cabin felt safe, until I saw the calendar on the wall, 1956. It was one of those thick ones with curled pages, each month hand-torn, faded at the corners. The paper felt crisp, not yellowed like it should have been. I'd just finished unpacking, spreading my sleeping bag out over the cot by the window. It was raining lightly, a steady mist that clung to the ridgeline and made the trees blur like old film. Everything inside the cabin was dry, though dustless, somehow, like someone had just stepped out. I came here to get away from people. I'm Dr. Alan Price, historian. University tenure track if the board doesn't implode on itself next month. I'm writing a book on forgotten settler structures in the Pisgah National Forest. Not ghost stories. Real cabins. Places with rotted beams and moss-eaten roofs, where families once burned kerosene for heat and carved names into the stone hearth. This cabin wasn't on any list. No coordinates, no tax records. I only found it because an old forestry worker sketched it into a margin of his notebook, with a single note beside it, "Doesn't stay empty." I thought he meant squatters. Bears. Maybe. I came with my recorder, notebook, and one duffel bag. The place didn't even smell like the woods. No mildew, no animal scat. It smelled like sawdust and iron and a hint of soap. I should have turned around then. But the door locked from the inside, and the hinges were too smooth for something abandoned. I felt like I'd stepped into a house that was waiting. That night, the quiet was deeper than any I'd known. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of my own breathing. Around midnight, I rolled over and noticed something odd. The window beside the cot had fogged over from the outside. When I sat up to check it, I noticed 3 fingerprints on the glass. Small. Too small for mine. I didn't sleep after that. By morning, the prints were gone. The mist had cleared. I told myself it was condensation, that I'd touched the window without realizing. I spent the day exploring the ridge and mapping the terrain around the cabin. But something about the woods felt off. Every tree too straight. Every sound too far away, like it was muffled. When I returned that evening, the calendar page was torn. August now. Yesterday, it had been July. I stand in front of the calendar for 10 minutes, just staring. The tear is perfect. A clean, downward rip through the July page. It lies folded at the baseboard, like someone dropped it gently. I check my phone, no signal, but the date still reads August 6th, 2025, not 1956, not anything close. The rational part of me insists it's a prank, a bad joke by some local kids or maybe a squatter I didn't notice. But the cabin doesn't feel lived in. It feels preserved. That night, I sit by the fire pit with my recorder. I start dictating field notes, but I can't focus. I keep glancing at the window, watching the trees. It's not what I see, it's what I don't. No movement, no wind, not even the usual flicker of moths near the glass. The air holds too still. Eventually, I shut the recorder off and go to bed, telling myself I'm imagining things, that I've been alone too long, thinking too much. At 2:03 a.m., I hear the front door creak open. One slow inch, then another, then nothing. I wait, not breathing. The sound doesn't come again. When I finally get the nerve to check, the door is still closed, locked. I test it, solid. But on the floor, near the threshold, lies a small paper triangle the corner of the September page, torn just so. I don't sleep. I sit upright on the cot with a flashlight in one hand, the stone fireplace at my back. At 4:30 a.m., I hear footsteps on the roof. Not loud, just a slow, steady pacing heel to toe, as if someone is checking each beam. I don't move. I just wait for dawn. When the light finally breaks, I find the October page already turned. I try to leave. I pack in 15 minutes, everything jammed into the duffel, and step out onto the trail. But the woods have changed. There are no markers. The sun doesn't track right. Every time I turn to orient myself, I catch a flicker of movement behind the trees, something just outside focus, like a shadow mimicking mine, half a second too late. The wind starts up around noon, but it doesn't blow the leaves. It just whispers. The word I keep hearing is stay. I hike until dusk and find the cabin again. Somehow I've looped. It looks exactly the same, except the fire inside is already lit. I never started it. My breath catches in my throat, but I don't go in. I sleep outside, leaning against the porch rail, eyes never fully closed. In the morning, the November page is up. I never see who or what does it, but each day that passes, another page turns. I try to leave twice more. I hike in full circles. Every path leads back here. My food is running low. My recorder stopped working yesterday. Battery's dead, though they were full the day before. This morning, the December page was already hanging when I woke. I think I know what happens next. And I'm not sure the calendar turns again.